What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? I hope you are having a fantastic day. If you're new to the channel, my name is Parker Nierenstein, and this is Vehicle Virgins. So, you're looking to buy your first supercar. Perhaps it's been a lifelong dream of yours, or yesterday you just decided, screw it, I'm buying a supercar, and your budget is $100,000. I remember this exact moment, and it was incredibly exciting. But in today's day and age, cars are so expensive. A BMW M5, a fast family sedan, starts at over $100,000. A Corvette ZR1 starts at over $100,000. This car that I'm in right now was $130 grand, and even a 911 Carrera S is more than $100,000. So can you really get a budget-friendly supercar for under 100 grand? Well, yes you can, and there are some awesome options. You see, depreciation is a beautiful thing. Supercars that were once over $200,000 several years ago have now dropped below 100 grand. This is good in two different reasons. One, it saves you a ton of upfront cash. And two, when you sell the car, you avoid all that depreciation that the previous owner had to undergo. My first supercar ever was a 2004 Lamborghini Gallardo. Hopefully some of you OG subscribers remember that. I picked up the 2004 Gallardo with 4,000 miles on it for just $102,000. Now, over the next 2 years, I put 12,000 miles on the car, was actually able to get out of the car when I ended up selling it for basically the exact same amount of money that I bought it for. So really the only thing I was paying for was gas and insurance that you're used to on any car, and maintenance costs, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. Now, those of you who have been with the channel for a while know that it wasn't exactly that simple. I let somebody drive it, they ended up crashing it, but with insurance, I ended up whole with the car. So without further ado, here are 5 of the best supercars under $100,000. First up is the first generation Audi R8 V10. Since the second generation was released in 2015, first gen cars have taken a severe depreciation hit, which means you can find 2011 to 2015 R8 V10s for under 100 grand without too much trouble. It's an absolutely gorgeous car. It was an Iron Man. It was kind of the quintessential supercar of the time. It drives really well, and because it's an Audi with that German engineering, it's actually a pretty reliable car, all things considered. It came with a 5.2-liter V10 that made 525 horsepower and 391 pound-feet of torque. And because the V10 is naturally aspirated, it sounds really good. Something to look out for, the 2014 model years and newer had a significant upgrade from the 2011 and 2012s, namely the transmission. In 2014, they upgraded the transmission to what Audi calls the S-tronic transmission, which is a 7-speed dual clutch trans. Much smoother, faster acceleration, easier to drive around town as compared to the 2011 and 2012 R8 V10s that had the R-tronic transmission, which is a 6-speed automated manual, very similar to Lamborghini's E-Gear. It's clunkier around town, it's more costly to maintain, and it's just not as good of a transmission. Also in 2014, we got updated bumpers, front and rear, as well as updated LED head and tail lights. You also get the availability of quilted leather stitching in the interior, which looks very nice. While these are a bit more expensive, 2014 also marked the year of the Audi R8 V10 Plus that had 25 more horsepower than the standard R8 V10. It also weighed 110 pounds less. Overall, the R8 in this generation has seen the majority of its depreciation already. It's not going to cost all that much to maintain, meaning the overall ownership experience, if you own one for 2 or 3 years and then sell it, isn't actually going to cost you all that much money. It's a fantastic supercar for under $100,000. Next up, we have the first generation Lamborghini Gallardo. This has a special piece in my heart. As I said, my first ever supercar was a 2004 Gallardo. 04 to 08 Gallardos marked the model years for the first generation. In 2009, they made a massive update, releasing the LP560 with a slightly upgraded engine, 5.2 liter instead of 5 liter, and a much better transmission. The looks were also completely redesigned as well. Unfortunately, the LP560s are still above $100,000, although I bet in a year or so, especially when they come out with the refreshed, updated, new version of the Huracan, those should plummet below $100,000. But the good news is the first generation Gallardo's 5-liter V10, with its different firing order from the 5.2-liter engine, means it sounds significantly better. With the right exhaust and test pipes, the Gallardos sound like a Formula One car. It is unbelievable, and with its wild looks, it honestly is the quintessential supercar of that era. The first-gen Gallardo came with a 5-liter V10 that in 2004 made 500 horsepower and 376 pound-feet of torque. It was able to sprint from 0 to 60 in just 4 seconds flat. The transmission options available were a 6-speed manual transmission and a 6-speed sequential automated manual dubbed the E-Gear. If you can find a manual Gallardo for less than $100K, absolutely buy it. It's more fun to drive, it's easier around town, and less expensive to maintain, substantially so, than the E-Gear cars. That being said, I had a 2004 E-Gear Gallardo, absolutely loved it. The shifts are clunky, but they're violent, it's emotional, it has this just analog feel to it that you don't get in the more modern day Lamborghinis. It does come with some issues, however. Clutches are really expensive to replace with the E-Gear, on the tune of about $7,000. Also, if you don't drive them properly, you always got to be in sport mode, try to reverse as little as possible, and you got to take off from a standstill with purpose in order to save the clutch life. Sometimes if you don't drive the E-Gear transmissions very well, you can go through a clutch really fast. Other things to look out for with the E-Gear is the hydraulic lines, those can go, and the E-Gear pump itself, which is very expensive to replace. Thankfully, I didn't have to do that in my ownership. Some things to look out for in terms of model years. In 2005, they added a front lift system for the Gallardo, which makes it a lot easier to drive around town, although the front bumper overhang isn't too crazy, so I didn't run into a lot of problems in my 04, but it is nice to have. In 2006, they added a power bump of 20 horsepower. They also changed the transmission gearing ratios to make them shorter, which improved acceleration times a decent amount, actually. Although there was something fun about hitting almost 60 miles an hour in first gear in the 2004 Gallardo. 2006 also meant you could get navigation as well as a backup camera. In 2007, they introduced the Spider if you want a convertible. And in 2008, they updated the software on the E-Gear transmission to make shifts a little bit better. Overall, though, the Gallardos are not that crazy in terms of maintenance costs. They've got an awesome buy proposition at under $100,000, and it is an awesome first supercar. Third up, well, Ferrari 360s can be found all day long for under $100,000. If you look close enough, you can actually find slightly higher mileage Ferrari F430s for under $100,000 for 2005 and 2006 model years. This has got to be the best looking car on the list and one of the best driving as well. In the middle of the 430 is a 4.3 liter naturally aspirated V8 that makes 483 horsepower and 343 pound-feet of torque. That 4.3 liter V8 is the reason behind the nomenclature F430. It's able to do 0 to 60 in just under 4 seconds. It sounds incredible. The 430 is one of the best sounding cars Ferrari has ever made, from the V8s, that is. There's 2 transmissions available, a 6-speed automated manual dubbed the F1 transmission and a 6-speed manual. You're not going to find 6-speed manual 430s for anywhere near $100,000. They were a lot more rare and they command a significant premium. But the F1 transmission is better than the E-Gear on the Lamborghini, and honestly, it shifts really quickly. The interior is probably the best on the list as well. The seats are absolutely gorgeous. The steering wheel fits perfectly in your hand with that gorgeous Manatino dial to shift between modes. Oh, I'm like fantasizing about a 430, just making this video right now. With the right exhaust, the 430 screams like an F1 car, and if you can find one, searching hard enough to get a clean example under 100K, it is a fantastic deal. Next up on the list is the McLaren MP4-12C. I cannot believe these are dipping down into the 100K and below range. It was the first car McLaren made for the road since the McLaren F1 and completely completely reset the benchmark for what it meant to have a fast supercar, absolutely annihilating its competitor, the Ferrari 458 Italia. In the back is a 3.8-liter twin-turbocharged V8 that made 593 horsepower and 445 pound-feet of torque. That's originally, and it was able to do 0 to 60 in a face-ripping 3.1 seconds, making it by far the fastest car on this list. In 2013, McLaren had a power bump to 616 horsepower. They actually offered those who had 2012 models a free power upgrade, so chances are the majority of the cars on the used car market now have that 616 horsepower. It's crazy that 7 years later, the 12C still has the power to weight ratio to compete against modern day supercars and potentially be faster in a straight line. But the 12C is not about straight line speed, despite the fact that it happens to be unbelievably fast. It is all about the racetrack. McLaren employed a really advanced suspension setup that gets rid of conventional sway bars in favor of a hydraulic suspension setup, which means at normal cruising speeds, it's one of the most comfortable supercars out there. Then you put it into track mode, the suspension tightens up, and it is unbelievable around the racetrack. It's crazy to think that this car used to be $250,000 to $300,000, and now they're dropping well below $130,000. And if you drop in a new exhaust and a tune, achieving 700 horsepower isn't all that difficult. There are some reliability issues with the early model 12Cs, kind of the 12C platform in general. Electronics weren't the best. In fact, the first year car didn't even have a door handle or an unlock button. You simply swiped your hand underneath the door in the position where there would be a door button and it unlocked. There were a lot of problems, however, with people unable to get into their car themselves. That being said, it's the only car on the list with beautiful dihedral butterfly doors, so you can flex on everyone around you. The suspension has been known to fail, and that is a very, very costly issue. But considering the fact how expensive the car was and now what you can get it for, it is one heck of a bargain. Last on the list is the 997 generation Porsche GT3. Porsche GT3s and GT3 RSs hold their value so incredibly well. It is very exciting to see a number of examples in the 15 to 25,000 mile range go below $100,000. It's an absolutely gorgeous car, appreciated by all car enthusiasts. It's analog, incredibly engaging to drive, and makes an insane value proposition at $100K and below. The successor to the rather hated 996 generation, the 997 GT3 comes with a beautiful, buttery, incredibly engaging to drive manual transmission. It's the only car on this list, apart from the R8, that you can find in a manual transmission that's incredible to drive for under $100,000. A manual, rear engine, rear wheel drive, analog driving experience. It doesn't get much better than that. In the back is a reworked version of the 996's 3.6 liter flat six that makes an impressive 415 horsepower, naturally aspirated, and 299 pound-feet of torque. It absolutely screams and begs to be revved up to its red line of 8,400 RPMs. It feels more like a go-kart than any car on the list and is sure to put a smile on your face every single second of driving. The car does ride firm, but Porsche's adaptive dampers control ride quality over bumps when you're driving it on a daily basis. It's not the ultimate daily driver given the fact that it is a manual, but you could actually drive this a lot of miles. Because it's a Porsche, it's going to last forever. These cars can climb well above 50,000 miles without problems. Oh, there's a beautiful Lamborghini Huracan I'm about to pass right now. It's not the craziest car on the list, but it's got timeless looks. It's arguably the most fun to drive, and because it's a manual and manuals are starting to phase out of the supercar world, it's likely going to become a collector's item eventually. So there you guys have it, 5 of the best supercars for under $100,000. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. I can make one in another price category. There's obviously some other cars that I didn't mention that are awesome buys as well. Like always, please browse the channel and subscribe, guys. Good luck to your car purchases. Always feel free to Instagram DM me at VehicleVirgins if you've got any questions about your future supercar purchase. I look forward to seeing you next video.